Madam Speaker, before I begin, I want to recognize that today marks the 230th anniversary of the Rules Committee being formally constituted for the first time. Now, the Ways and Means Committee, which my Massachusetts friend and colleague Richie Neal chairs, likes to point out that they are the oldest standing committee in the House. While that is true, I like to remind my friends that the Rules Committee is the oldest committee in the House, being first created on this day in 1789 as a select committee. So it is especially appropriate that we are on the floor today to do some important work before us. And for the record, Madam Speaker, the Ways and Means Committee can celebrate their 230th anniversary on July 24th. Now that I've cleared that up, the first measure included in this rule is SJ Res 7. And we are taking action on this because Yemen is in crisis. In a country of roughly 28 million people, an estimated 22 million of them are in need of humanitarian assistance. That's 75% of the population facing famine, disease, and displacement. Half the country is at risk of starvation. The famine and disease facing children is particularly sobering. Save the Children estimates that as many as 85,000 children under the age of 5 have died because of hunger and disease since 2015. All told, this is one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, the site of the fastest growing cholera epidemic ever recorded and the biggest food emergency on the planet. Yet, it wasn't caused by some natural disaster. It is entirely man-made, the result of a Saudi-led military conflict. Seemingly every day, bombs fall on weddings, hospitals, school buses, and homes as civilian neighborhoods are regularly targeted. This is not some abstract war happening half a world away. In fact, the United States is intimately involved in this conflict. We have supported the Saudi reign of terror by providing logistics, intelligence, ground support, and mid-air refueling of bombers. Virtually all the bombs that fall on Yemen say, "Made in the United States of America." Make no mistake, Madam Speaker, the United States is involved in a war in Yemen today. But if our constituents look through the congressional record, they wouldn't find a vote authorizing it. That's because this body abdicated its responsibility to declare war when it began 4 years ago. You know, we took one of our most sacred responsibilities and handed it to the executive branch. And it's not the first time we've done it, but it's becoming a habit around here. We first let the Bush administration decide the contours of our involvement abroad, and that continues through the Trump administration today. And if it wasn't outrageous enough, past Republican Congresses used every legislative trick in the book to block members from even debating our role there. On 2 separate occasions, they went so far as to strip War Powers resolutions related to Yemen of their privileges. It was unprecedented. You know, but when it comes to Saudi Arabia, this administration and my Republican friends are all too content to look the other way. You know, when they murdered a Washington Post journalist, when they lured him into a consulate in Turkey, and they murdered him, and then they used a bone saw to dismember him, and we know, based on our intelligence reports, that the highest level of the Saudi government was involved in that terrible human rights atrocity, the Trump administration did nothing. They rationalized it. They justified it. They basically turned a blind eye. When it comes to human rights, this administration has abdicated its moral authority. And that should be of concern to everybody in this chamber, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. Because if the United States stands for anything, we need to stand out loud and square for human rights. And if the President of the United States and his administration don't want to do it, then we should. No Congress should be complicit in abdicating our Article I constitutional responsibility. Thankfully, this Democratic Congress is doing the opposite. We are reasserting our power, and we are taking a stand when it comes to human rights. I want to thank especially to the dedication of Speaker Pelosi and Chairman Engel, and Congressman Ro Khanna, Congresswoman Jayapal, Congressman Pocan, and the entire Congressional Progressive Caucus. We are considering a bipartisan measure that makes clear it is time for the United States involvement in Yemen to end. No more excuses. This is virtually identical to the resolution we passed in February. The difference this time is that this is the first opportunity that this House has had to send something on the war in Yemen right to the President's desk. So I urge all of my colleagues, seize this opportunity. We have a constitutional responsibility, and we have a moral obligation to get this done. Don't let any legislative maneuvers deter us from ending our nation's complicity in this humanitarian catastrophe. Let's pass this resolution free of changes that would prevent it from going right to the President. And let me make that more clear. If we change a single word, we will derail this resolution. Now, the second measure included in this rule is H-Res 271, in response to a war of a different kind, the Republican war on health care. The Trump Justice Department recently moved in federal court not only to strike down pre-existing condition coverage under the Affordable Care Act, but to overturn this law completely. If the President succeeds in Texas versus U.S., the protections for pre-existing conditions will be gone. The Medicaid expansion will be nullified. Insurance premiums will skyrocket. And I could go on and on and on and on. Striking down the Affordable Care Act would be a tragedy felt by every single American. We would return to the days when our health insurance marketplace was like the Wild West, when insurers were free to decline or limit coverage because someone had acne or received an organ transplant, or even because they were a victim of domestic violence. That's how messed up our system was, and that is the system that this President and many of my colleagues want to return to. Now, for the life of me, I cannot understand what President Trump and his allies in Congress have against Americans getting health care. For nearly a decade now, they have worked endlessly to sabotage the Affordable Care Act through the Congress, the courts, and administrative actions. Apparently, they're not happy that 20 million people have gained health care coverage because of this law, or that 130 million Americans with pre-existing conditions can get care. You know, we should be celebrating these advancements, but instead, some on the other side won't be satisfied until the Affordable Care Act is repealed completely. Now, this Democratic majority has taken a different course. On the very first day of this Congress, we brought the full weight of the House of Representatives to bear in this lawsuit. As a result, the House Counsel has already intervened in this case to protect the health care Americans depend on. Now, this resolution is our chance to speak with one voice against the administration's attempts to abolish the ACA. I've seen my friends on the other side issue sternly worded press releases and strongly worded letters to the administration, but now it is time to back up words with votes. And then I hope they'll work with us moving forward as this majority takes action to reverse the administration's health care sabotage and strengthen health care for every single American. Madam Speaker, I believe that health care ought to be a fundamental right for every single person in this country. It is unconscionable to me that rather than working with us to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, rather than working us to expand health care protections, my Republican friends have chose instead to wipe it out. I don't know how anybody could think like that. I don't know what motivates the President of the United States and some on the other side of the aisle to move in that direction. And now we're told by the President, even though he doesn't have a plan to replace this, if he succeeds in voiding the Affordable Care Act, he said, well, we'll provide you one in the year 2021. So the man who has spent all of his time trying to rip protections away from people with pre-existing conditions, the person who wants to not allow you to keep your kids on their insurance until they're 26, the leader of our country who doesn't believe in capping insurance when it comes to people with lifetime illnesses, the person who doesn't want to lower the cost of prescription drugs, I go on and on and on and on, says, I want to repeal it, I want it gone, I want the courts to null and void it, and then just trust me, and then we will come up with some magical plan, some secret plan after the election. I don't think the American people are going to fall for that kind of nonsense, and they shouldn't, because health care is not a Democratic issue or Republican issue. It is a moral issue, and it is not really even an issue. It is a value that all of us should share. And so I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support us in sending a message loud and clear to the administration that we've had enough of their attempts to sabotage the health care bill. We've had enough of them trying to take health insurance away from the American people, that we are going to stand here and make it very clear that we do believe that everybody's entitled to good health care in this country. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.